Welcome to Women in La Frontera. My name is Brenda Nettle Riojas, and I am here with Kristina Garza, continuing our conversation on the sanctity of life, all the work that we have ahead of us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Kristina, it was a real joy to talk to you last week about your story as a missionary and what brought you back down to South Texas.
Thank you. Yes, it was a joy to reflect on and see for myself the way that the Lord has worked over the past few years, and getting to reflect back on where he started to work when I got involved with the pro-life movement. It was just such a gift. Thank you.
Well, there's so much to talk about, but we want to focus on, again, the work ahead of us. The Dobbs decision has made quite an impact. I mean, it's like a ongoing rumble across the nation.
Like an earthquake.
But I think a question that a lot of pro-life activists are being asked is, what was the experience like to get this win, if you may?
Yes, I think that's a great way to put it, because it really was like a new beginning, a monumental shift in the work that we're doing. And for those who had been actively involved, maybe full-time, maybe part-time, maybe praying on the sidewalk every once in a while or every Saturday or weekly, for those who had been working in the legislative arena, for those who had been in pregnancy care centers, anybody who had been involved in pro-life work, from what I have learned through conversations and shared with friends, is that all of a sudden the landscape was different. For those who had been praying for so long, who had made it their mission for so long to educate and to work to the point of getting Roe overturned, suddenly we had this win, this change, and it's like what we had been waiting for was finally here. But on the other hand, it's not like abortion ended. And so I think that that's a misconception people had, that congratulations, wonderful victory, how do you feel? Thinking a lot of people thought like abortion was going to immediately end, but that's not the case. Overturning Roe versus Wade is just the beginning. So we'd been fighting almost to begin the next phase of the battle. So it's a surreal experience, because in a way, we had been waiting a long time and it is a victory. But on the other hand, really our work has just begun. As soon as Dobbs was overturned, there were some states that had trigger laws, Texas being one of them, and abortion was immediately made illegal in the state. However, in other states like California, nothing changed. And so I think there's this misconception that Dobbs threw abortion out the window. But what it said was that the people can now decide. Dobbs did not really comment on the act of abortion. It really just said that Roe versus Wade was bad law. The Supreme Court was never intended to create legislation for our country. Now, that's something I learned in high school government, which I don't know if that's being lost or if we've kind of forgotten the scope of the three branches of government. But the Supreme Court, that's not their job to create legislation. And so Roe versus Wade was a bad law to begin with. What the Dobbs decision did by overturning Roe versus Wade was send the decision to the states to legislate for themselves, and to the people to vote for elected representatives who would represent the people with their views, be it pro-life or pro-abortion, which is kind of scary. Because if voters aren't informed, then they might be voting for representatives who would like to expand abortion access, as we're seeing in some states.
So there's a lot of work ahead of us.
There is a lot of work ahead of us. The first phrase that came to mind when I was kind of like giving thanks for the overturning of Roe versus Wade was hearts and minds. We need to educate and inform to change people's minds and to help people make informed decisions according to well-formed consciences. But we also need to change hearts to be passionate for the Lord and to love the dignity of life that we've been given by being created in God's image. And that takes conversion and evangelization.
Which is what brought you to the
valley. Yeah.
To the valley.
That's what brought me here in the first place. So I'm so excited.
Well, you've been, as I can tell you've been following this very closely. What are your thoughts on what's happening in Congress?
Yeah. So I think I'd like to just read a quote from the actual decision to kind of place what's happening in Congress right now. Justice Alito is the one that wrote the introduction to the decision. And he said, just to encapsulate what the decision means, he said, it is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. The permissibility of abortion and the limitations upon it are to be resolved like most important questions in our democracy, by citizens trying to persuade one another and then voting. So abortion is in the hand of the citizens and our elected representatives, which include Congress, our senators, and our House representatives. At this point, at the time of recording in July, so July 7th, in the House there were two bills introduced to codify abortion as it was permitted during the time of Roe versus Wade. On July 7th, there were two bills introduced in the House to codify abortion in legislation as it was during Roe versus Wade. So basically, abortion on demand for any reason up to 9 months gestation. They're House Bills 8296 and 8297. House Bill 8296 is called the Women's Health Protection Act of 2022, but it doesn't protect women's health. All it is granting abortion access throughout the country for any reason through all 9 months of pregnancy. It would supersede state laws. So even though Texas at this moment outlaws abortion, meaning abortion is illegal, it's illegal to obtain, perform, pay for one in the state of Texas. But House Bill 8296, the Women's Health Protection Act, would supersede that law and then effectively return us back to what it was like during Roe versus Wade. But it would be written in law, not just a Supreme Court decision. And the reason this is significant is because these bills are effectively in voters' hands. At this point, it would only take 2 pro-abortion senators to pass this act. We currently have a filibuster, so it would not pass in the Senate. But it would only take 2 pro-abortion senators come the November midterm elections if we were to elect or allow to be elected 2 pro-abortion senators, then this would become the law of the land. And so we have the victory of Dobbs. However, we also have a lot of work to do to keep the victory and the momentum of the victory going, and to keep abortion illegal in the states where they have decided to make abortion illegal. The second bill, 8297, that was introduced in July 7th, is the Ensuring Access to Abortion Act of 2022. And what it says is that there will be no legal ramifications for someone who either travels across state lines or takes a woman across state lines to obtain an abortion. For abortion advocates, this sounds very reasonable because, for example, in the state of Texas, abortion is illegal. So someone could just take a woman to Tennessee or New Mexico and obtain an abortion until Tennessee makes it illegal, hopefully soon. To an abortion advocate, this sounds like they're just obtaining healthcare easily. However, if you think about abortion in the terms of covering up crime, so a lot of times women may be taken across by an abuser, a trafficker. And so for them, there would be no legal ramifications. And so what it does is really give freedom to people to abuse women, to take them across straight lines and pay for an abortion. And that would be the end of the story, and the woman would not be legally protected. So Representative Kathy McMorris, not jokingly, but referred to this sarcastically as the Loopholes for Child Traffickers Act, because this law does not protect women. It protects abortion and abortionists and people who want to pay for abortions, but it does not protect women. And so to protect women, it's up to us. It's incumbent on us to be informed ourselves, but to inform the people around us, our family, our friends, to know what's happening in the country, and really to get out there and evangelize about the dignity of human life, and really to vote pro-life, to make sure that the people representing us in government, the people that are representing us as citizens, will protect human life at that very vulnerable stage before birth.
Well, and so it behooves us to get informed, educate, like I said, educate ourselves, educate others. The Focus on the Family had some really wonderful tips in regard to some of the myths. We hear, for example, that, what's the first one? Pro-life just means pro-birth. There's a lot more involved to being pro-life.
Yes, a huge misconception. Oh, you are pro-life. You just care about the babies until they're born. And then what? Do you take care of the woman? Of course, that's a huge misconception. But of course, we care about human life from the moment of natural conception to natural death, and every age in between. So I think people just don't know the vast resources that are available to someone through a woman through pregnancy, but even after pregnancy. Even here in the Rio Grande Valley, we have the McAllen Pregnancy Center, but also VFAC, who will, Vida y Familia, they will help women with medical care, with consultation classes throughout pregnancy, but then after, parenting classes, baby clothes, diapers, all of those needs and support that a woman has can be met. We have resources here in the Valley, but there are a lot of national resources as well. So we absolutely care. We care about babies and women.
Absolutely. Yes. I know the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has a new initiative involving all parishes and educating all parishes on walking with women and walking with women in need and making those resources available. So we as ourselves are going to look for better ways to publicize that and make it available for women. Very important. Another myth about abortion solves overpopulation. I'm sure you've heard that one.
It's funny because that was one of the most common arguments that came up on college campuses, 10 years ago. So it's really funny that it keeps coming up. But I think with all of those arguments, not just overpopulation, but even other arguments that would come up, the root of the issue, the one question to answer is, what is abortion? So whenever people would try to come up with like a reason to justify abortion, it's hard to have a conversation about those reasons without first defining it. So in debate, it would be the premise, right? We need to set a premise. What is abortion? I would ask that every conversation. Well, what is abortion? Maybe we're disagreeing about the definition of abortion. And so if we disagree about what an abortion is, then we can't answer whether it's justified, whether for overpopulation or rape or whatever, unless we agree what abortion is. So I would ask, what is abortion? And it's funny because a lot of times we were talking about something different. So it's important to define what is abortion. Is abortion killing a human being? So many people believe that it's not. And so,
that's what puzzles.
Yes.
That's what puzzles me. I still cannot understand that.
Right. And I think that there's some confusion about when human life begins. So a lot of people would say, well, abortion doesn't kill a human being because a fetus is not a human being. And so really the conversation needs to be walked back to, when does human life begin? Is a human being valuable? Is it justified to kill a human being before birth? And does abortion do just that? Does abortion kill a valuable human being before birth? These are the questions that need to be answered before all of the other arguments, because all of those arguments are trying to justify abortion based on a false definition, that abortion does not actually kill a valuable human being, that the unborn is not actually valuable and worth protecting.
Now, you've been on college campuses across the country. You've traveled extensively. How is it possible that people don't understand what abortion does? Or some people don't understand what abortion does?
That is a great question. And I can tell you from my own experience, I can only speak to my own experience, right? I didn't know that abortion killed a valuable human being until I probably didn't internalize that fact until I was in college, because I didn't grow up in a home where we talked about it. I didn't go to a Catholic school where it was mentioned. Even in my confirmation classes, it was only mentioned in one class and it was never defined. And so I knew I was pro-life. I knew that abortion was bad, but I had never had anyone connect the dots for me, which sounds unreasonable. Like, how can a reasonable college student not make this connection? But it had never been shown to me. Nobody had said abortion kills a baby. Nobody had said that to me. And so I never thought about it. I even had in my public school, my 8th grade science teacher, she had, I don't know why she had this in her class, but she was a biology teacher and she had a pig embryo in a jar, and everybody would look at it like, whoa, it's a baby pig. And she would say, no, it was never born. It was never alive. It was never born. And those subtle ways that even teachers teach students that the unborn is not human, those stick with you, because I remember being kind of confused, like, so we're not alive before we're born. What does she mean by that? Oh, so it's an embryo. That means it was never a pig? Like, I didn't quite understand why she said that, but it was enough to create confusion for me to never make that connection when I was thinking about human life. Like, oh, an embryo isn't alive because it's not born. And so sometimes people pick up these ideas in their public schools, unfortunately, maybe in their Catholic schools, from friends, from social media, that whatever is growing inside a woman's uterus when she's pregnant is not a human being. I've had students say that, like, oh, it's not a baby. They've never questioned, what is it? If it's not a baby, what is it? So when the college students would ask me, when I would say, what is abortion? Oh, it's when you interrupt a pregnancy, when a woman stops being pregnant, when you terminate a pregnancy. And I would say, okay, do we agree that terminate means end? Yes. Do we agree that when a woman is pregnant, she's pregnant with a baby? No. So that we have to walk the definition way back, because a lot of times people think that pregnancy, like, they've never thought, oh, pregnancy is when I'm pregnant with a baby, unless I want it, right? So we would have to define pregnancy before we could define abortion. And they would say, oh, and I would say, okay, what's growing inside of her if she's not pregnant with a human being? Well, it's a fetus. Okay, well, fetus is a biological term for little one. Like, an elephant is pregnant with an elephant fetus. A dolphin is pregnant with a dolphin fetus. If a human being is pregnant, what kind of fetus is she pregnant with? And they would have to think about it. And they had never been questioned. Okay, if it's a human fetus and it's alive and it's growing, is it a human being? And this was the first time that a lot of adults were being asked to question this. So really, we have a lot of work in education. One, to show people, show them with fetal diagrams. That was like the most valuable tool, is to be able to show them what fetal development looked like with pictures, but then ask them, like, when a woman is pregnant, is she pregnant with a human being? Because obviously abortion ends that process, but what happens to the human being inside of her? Force people to think about it and answer that question. And then we can decide, oh, it's a bad thing. We should make it illegal, right? If it does end a human being's life, then we should make it illegal. So yeah, lots of work.
A lot of work indeed. So we definitely need to be asking these questions and having more conversations with people, and trying to gain an understanding of where we're each at on our understanding in that. Because again, going back to this information here, another misconception is the statement is, banning abortion only reduces the number of safe abortions. And what was interesting to me was that the year abortion was legalized in the U.S., 1973, more women died from legal abortions than illegal abortions. That was surprising to hear.
Yeah, it's funny because statistics, I'm a little skeptical, because a lot of states aren't even required to report their abortions. And so that still gets back to the question, does abortion kill a human being? Because if it kills a human being, there's no way to practice vice virtuously. So what does it mean when you're killing a human being safely? Obviously, it's not safe for the human being that's being killed.
Amen.
Yeah. So, that argument still begs the question, does abortion kill a human being? Because if it does, then it's not safe for the baby. And if it's not safe for the baby, chances are that it's not safe for the mother. We see a lot of women who have been severely hurt by abortion, both emotionally and physically. So emotionally, we know that her chances of depression, of contemplating or committing suicide go up. It increases the risk of breast cancer. But also, there are a lot of women who have been severely, severely hurt and scarred physically by abortion, perforated uterus, scarred tissue in the uterus, infertility, unable to conceive later, or multiple miscarriages or preterm birth afterwards because of the damage done to the trauma to the uterus during the abortion procedure if she had a surgical procedure. So this idea of safe abortions, what exactly do they mean by safe? That's what I wonder, because it doesn't sound safe to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another topic that we'll have to say for another day is the harm that contraception does as well.
Absolutely.
But
intimately connected. Yeah.
Yes. One, which is another misconception that people use abortion. Abortion is contraception in some people's eyes.
Yeah. So there is,
and that's disconcerting.
Yeah, idea that, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was just reading about a website yesterday called Plan C. So in case your Plan B, birth control, abortifacient fails, you can use Plan C, which is medical abortion that people are working to order online. Unfortunately, our president, who we pray for, signed an executive order to make abortion access available. I mean, it doesn't really change, practically speaking, what's happening right now in the states. But what he did do is request that the Department of Health and Human Services make medical abortions, chemical abortions, more available and legal to dispense in pharmacies and online. Right now, you need a prescription.
Right, and that was July 8th.
July 8th.
Yep. July 8th.
So the day after the bills were introduced in the House. But so this is Plan C, right? The idea that abortion is contraceptive. If you can thin and gray the line between contraception and abortion, if you can say that babies are not valuable enough, that we need to contracept, be against conception, right? If you break down the word against conception, if we can treat babies as accessories, I'm too busy, or there are a lot of reasons that people contracept, but it includes this idea that babies are optional, they're dispensable, they're not valuable. We have control over human life. It's very easy to then take the next step to, quote, Plan C, right? Medical abortion, because if the baby was not valuable before it was conceived, why would we think it's valuable after it's conceived? It's a very thin line. And after years and years of this being normalized in our country, that line grows thinner and thinner, especially if we have not believed in our heart that human life is valuable and precious. And we have a whole generation of people who have not learned that, either in their home from poor catechesis or from our government. My generation, anybody born after 1973, had to grow up with the idea that our government did not consider us human for 9 months of our life. We had to grow up with the reality that we could have been killed. Many people my age, maybe a little older, and a lot of generations after me, have to grow up with the reality that a doctor told their parent to abort them. And I've heard so many stories of young people whose parents were told to abort by their doctor because of whatever reason, poverty, diagnosis of some kind of medical, quote, defect, which may or may not have actually been true, poor situation. Maybe the mother was alone, but there are varied stories of women being told to abort their children because a doctor or a family member or a friend or a teacher or a school counselor or a counselor in a clinic or a nurse didn't think that their baby was valuable, had a place in this world. And that was the law of the land. So it was socially acceptable for a time to just believe that we could throw away a generation of babies. And we have to live with that reality. And I think that it's kind of a dark cloud that's going to hang over us, to live with the reality that our government did not consider our lives valuable. And so that idea of contraception, a baby is only valuable when you want one. A baby is only valuable when it's convenient. A baby is only valuable when you have the right income, when you have the right house, when you have the right whatever circumstance. I think we're going to be suffering from the ramifications of that way of thinking for a while.
I definitely see that. And I think we see that in the violence, too, in our country. Because I think it was Mother Teresa who said, if you can kill a baby, then how are you surprised that people are so free to or willing to kill take another human life?
Right. If we can't value life when it begins biologically, fertilization, then how can we be expected to reasonably value a life at any other point on the age spectrum?
Right. Yeah, I have here, she gave a message to the Supreme Court once upon a time, and she said, America needs no words from me, Mother Teresa, to see how your decision in Roe versus Wade has deformed a great nation. The so-called right to abortion has pitted mothers against their children and women against men. It has shown violence and discord at the heart of the most intimate human relationships. It has aggravated the derogation of the father's role in an increasingly fatherless society. It has portrayed the greatest of gifts, a child, as a competitor, an intrusion, and an inconvenience. It has nominally accorded mothers unfettered dominion over the dependent lives of their physically dependent sons and daughters. And in granting this unconscionable power, it has exposed many women to unjust and selfish demands from their husbands or other sexual partners. I mean, as she goes on, but it makes you think that we've opened the door to more violence.
Absolutely. She sums it up really in those few sentences. She was so humble, but one I remember reading a reflection, kind of evidence of her sanctity was that she was able to take these really complex and beautiful theological ideas and just say them in one sentence. And then only a couple of sentences, she really just summarized the state of things today, the state of things with abortion on demand available in our country.
Which brings me to this next claim being made was, well, my body, my choice.
Oh, I love it. I love that argument. We hear it so often. But there's this, I think that, our culture is very individualistic. My body, I have all of the rights over my body, which is true. So, we do have a right to make decisions about our own body, but the way that I, playfully, but also one of the best ways to illustrate this, especially with young people, was to use a visual example, which I'll try to describe because we're listening. So when I was with a college student or a young person, just having this conversation, I would wave my hands in the air kind of crazy and be like, I have the freedom to do what I want with my body, and wave my hands, right? And then I would gradually get closer and closer to them. I'm waving my hands and I have the freedom to do so because it's my body. And everybody agrees that that's okay. And that's the law. And I would get closer and I would see people get more and more uncomfortable as I got closer. As soon as I wave my hands and slap you in the face, it becomes illegal because my right to do what I want with my body has just infringed on your freedom to be safe. And you would call the cops and charge me with assault and be justified. because my right to do what I want with my body has now resulted in violence against your body. And this still gets back to the question, is the baby in the womb, the human fetus growing in the womb of the mother during her pregnancy, is that a human being, and does abortion kill that human being? Because if it does, if that is a human being, and if abortion kills that human being, we don't have one body in question, we have two. When a woman is pregnant, does she all of a sudden develop two sets of DNA? No, she has her set of DNA and the baby has his or her set of DNA. Does all of a sudden do we say, oh, there are two heartbeats. The mother has two heartbeats now. The woman has two heartbeats now. No, she has a heartbeat and the baby has his or her own heartbeat. Oh, do they have four eyes? No, the woman has her two eyes and the baby in the womb has his or her two eyes. There are two bodies. And we do have the right to do what we want or need with our own body, but once a woman is pregnant, she does not have the right to commit violence against the other body. And I know that in our American mindset, that seems very controversial because that little body happens to be inside her body. And so we have this concept of like, well, that's infringing upon my freedom. But true freedom, as St. John Paul II would say, is the freedom to do the right thing, the good thing. True freedom is the freedom to be virtuous, to do what is right and just. That's true freedom.
Right. Even if it's hard.
Even if it's hard.
Thank you, Kristina, for joining us today. So much more we want to talk about.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And where do we go from here, though? I mean,
So I would say, like, the phrase that is still on my mind is hearts and minds. Hearts and minds. That's not just my responsibility. It's not just the Office of Pro-Life, it's not just the Diocese of Brownsville's pro-life office responsibility. It's not just Students for Life of America's responsibility. It's not just our legislators or Governor Abbott's responsibility. The job of educating people and evangelizing is all of our responsibility. We are all called to mission. All of us, every single one of us, right? After Mass, we go forth, and it's our job to bring Jesus to everybody. Jesus, who was a baby in the womb of Mary. It's our job to help people know that they were created in the image and likeness of God, and that they have dignity and value just by virtue of being human, and that women deserve protection from abortion, that babies deserve protection from abortion, families deserve protection from abortion, and the way that, practically speaking, we can do that at this moment in time, temporally, is one, to educate what abortion is, make it unthinkable, and help people choose different options. If they are in a pregnancy or are scared, there are pro-life options available, and we can make those available, those resources available in the show notes. But also to vote for people who share our values, vote for people who are pro-life, who will vote to protect life, who will legislate to protect life, especially in the midterm elections. Vote for people who will represent our values, who will represent protecting babies in the womb.
Right. Well, it's always a joy to talk to you.
Thank you,
because
Brenda.
there is hope in the world.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of healing that's needed in our country.
Yeah.
We continue to pray for everyone.
Yes.
And that their hearts and minds will be
opened, changed,
and
converted.
that we can learn how to walk together with grace.
Absolutely. There is a lot of work to be done and a lot of healing to be done, but there is so much hope right now. I think we're living in a really blessed time in our country. We're going to see a lot of graces. And I think if we continue forward doing the mission that God has called us to and working on hearts and minds, we're going to receive a lot of graces. The Lord has a lot to offer us right now.
Absolutely, because every human being matters.
Absolutely.
And again, I just became a grandmother 3 months ago, and so
congratulations.
when I hold my grandson in my arms, there's just so much joy, and so I weep for those families who have not had that opportunity for one reason or another, not to hold that infant in their arms. But there is healing.
Yes,
there is
and
healing.
if there is anybody that has experienced an abortion, either in their family, themselves, a sibling, a friend, there is hope and healing available, and I just like to encourage anybody, if they've experienced that pain, there's mercy. The Lord's mercy knows no end, and there are resources available to address that specific wound and very specific pain.
Right. And usually we close out our program with a Frontera tip, but I think my tip will be to take some time to go before the Blessed Sacrament and pray for peace and healing in our world.
Absolutely. So my tip was going to be some summer reading, but maybe I'll save that for next time because it's completely just
but
off
that's
track.
fine.
Really?
But that's off. Yes.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right. So on a lighter note, my Frontera tip actually has to do with some summer reading. I read this summer, intending to put it in my classroom, the Will Wilder book series by Raymond Arroyo. I would recommend it maybe for late junior high, 12 and over, high school definitely. But the Will Wilder book series, I loved it. Raymond Arroyo is a solid Catholic writer, has a great voice. The Will Wilder character is brave and human, and he makes a lot of mistakes, but there's always grace for him. And it's a great maybe if you're trying to choose like a series for your kids to get into, but you're worried about something like Harry Potter, which is kind of, it's long, but if you're kind of not wanting them to get into that right away, or you're a little anxious about the book series that are in there and the content that might be in there, Will Wilder is a great option because, he uses relics and he encounters spiritual battle, but it's all very fun, and he has healthy family relationships and healthy friendships, but he's still relatable as a character. So I highly, highly recommend it.
Well, and we need reading and characters like that.
Yes, and it's just a feel-good series, The news is really heavy right now, and especially like researching all this stuff was a little heavy, so this was a nice little escape for me in my downtime.
Well, thank you, Kristina, for joining us, and
Yeah,
thank you
absolutely.
all for joining us today on Women in la Frontera. Until next time, let's go use the gifts God has given us to set the world on fire with God's love and grace.
Amen.